All right, we are live. Welcome to Office Hours, episode number 4, which happens to be on 4/4/2022. So we're gonna have to work in fours somehow. How can we talk about fours? Oh, the Final Four was this weekend. Did you watch any of that?
Oh, look
There's
at
a
you.
whole bunch of good basketball this weekend.
Yeah. So for the basketball, I on Saturday my kids were in soccer. After soccer, we had 3 games. There was actually with my nieces. There was an extra one, but yeah, it was soccer all day, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning and ending at whatever 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then we went to watch basketball. We had family, met up, and basketball was on, so we got to watch the KU game. And most of the family left. My oldest 2 kids, they stayed and they watched the entire game, the KU game, with me, and that was awesome.
Nice.
Good time. And it was just us. They both played basketball for me, which was great, and I enjoyed coaching them. And then after the game, or actually it was, I think, halftime, we said, hey, let's go get a new TV and we'll watch it at home. Anyway, different story. I made mistakes.
But we decided to get a new TV.
I
like the impulsive buying there.
What happened was I bought the big TV, but it was 6 inches too wide for the wall that we would put it on, so I had to take it back. But anyway,
I saw the picture. It was like a fireplace mantle, right? Because on a wall it's okay, but on a mantle, if it's hanging over, it just doesn't look right.
So, anyways, had to take that back. But my kids watched the KU game, and we cheered for North Carolina for that game. I used to work for the University of Kansas. I was the cheerleading coach over there, so that's why we got to cheer for Kansas. I have a lot of friends that are Jayhawks.
You got one more game to cheer for them.
Yeah, and this is gonna be a tough one. My kids are like, well, so who do we cheer for now? We cheer for the Jayhawks on one game. We cheered for North Carolina on the other. But by default, I'd tell my kids to cheer for the underdog. Well, then last night was the women's game. They're like, well, we're not the underdog. I was like, well, yeah, I know it's hard to explain, but we're going to cheer for South Carolina. They stayed up and they watched the game.
Yeah.
So, this whole Final Four.
That's awesome.
They never dribbled a basketball before October. So now we've been through this. My daughter's team, they won their championship. But just having that extra stuff outside, it's important. And I tell everybody, you can be a geek and you can do this tech thing, but you have to balance it out. And if you can balance it out, the stuff that you learn, the path that you're on, it's going to be better. It's going to be more enjoyable and it's going to be more steep. Good. I like it that you pulled in 4-4-4.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. I'll get back to the Final Four in a second, but that's really that's a great way to put it, because you're never going to learn everything. We always want to keep learning. There's never enough hours in the day or the week to learn everything you're going to need to learn, right? Just take your time, learn, take your path, learn, but take time for yourself. Get outside, spend time with the family. You and I go to the gym to get out and kind of take our frustrations out on some barbells for a little bit. Whatever that is for you, you got to do it. So great point there. The North Carolina Duke game was such a great game. Everybody's kind of sick in the house, so everybody went to bed. So I'm up by myself watching this game. 2 minutes to go in the game. You know how it ended. My daughter gets up, and I'm like, oh, Jesus. I'm like, do I pause it? So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to pause it. So I paused it, went upstairs, sitting with my daughter. And then, of course, I'm getting texts from friends about who are watching the game too. I'm like, dang it. I got to turn my do not disturb on when I pause live streaming sports. So that's a good tip for anyone out there.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a great weekend of basketball. So cool. Well, what are we doing here today? Let's go ahead and get started. Usually we start with kind of our calendar here, what week it is, what we have coming out this week. As you can see, today's Monday, April 4th. Nothing today. Some few patch releases this week. Spring Framework 5.2.21 and 5.3.19. Pretty quiet this week. Maybe everybody's on spring break.
Last week, we had some unexpected releases.
We did. We had some very quick pushes towards the end of the week. And I guess the way that we can kind of jump into this is start over here. If you go to spring.io/blog, the newest post up here at the time of this recording here is the Spring Framework RCE mitigation alternative. So, oh wait, this is not the one I wanted to look at. Let's jump down to this one, I think. Yes. So we want to talk about this. There was a vulnerability found in the Spring Framework that affects both Spring MVC and Spring Webflux. And it was found last week and patched up. As you can see, they've kind of added updates here as they're kind of going along with this, as they're getting more information, the Spring team that is. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here in the blog posts. I guess, where do you want to start with this, Deshaun?
Just what is it? Like what was happening? It was a 0-day. It was a similar exploit to the Log4 shell. But my understanding is it was kind of a unique deployment model.
Exactly.
It's only affected if you're deploying an exploded war file or just the war file.
Just a war file to Apache Tomcat as a server container.
Because it gets exploded there. So that's the only time.
And so I saw a couple of videos on YouTube over the weekend comparing it to the Log4j exploit, and I'm like, well, hold on. It's not as sure. It's Spring Framework's probably more widely used than Log4j, but as you said, it's this very specific use case. So unfortunately, a lot of people aren't on anything over Java 8 yet. I mean, we know that adoption is kicking in, and hopefully towards the end of this year, much better. But still, a lot of people are on Java 8. So this is JDK 9 or higher. I don't know. There's still a very subset of people that may be deploying war files. Everything I've done in the last 5 years.
If I think of somebody still deploying war files, are they the same crew that's upgrading to the latest JDK?
Right.
But people are being affected, right?
Yeah. But again, as we're just trying to get to, it's a small percentage here. So this blog post you may want to read through. Again, if that is you, this is something you want to pay attention to. And again, we have Spring Framework 5.3.18 and 5.2.20, which contains the fixes. I don't know where it is. Oh, so here's a workaround too. So if you are able to upgrade to these newest versions, that is definitely the recommended approach. Given the circumstances that this attack may hit, some people may not be able to upgrade. So maybe you're on like Spring Framework 4 or something. And I don't think that we have a 4 release patch for that or anything. So if that is you and you can't upgrade, there are some suggested workarounds in here. So, having to do with upgrading Tomcat, downgrading to Java 8, and this disallowed fields. And so this is kind of where the attack kind of centered on. So I don't want to read through the whole blog post, but that's it. I mean, that's really kind of the update on where that is. But again, good thing is the Spring team reacted very well to this. They saw it, they found the problem, and they got it fixed. I think it was reported last Tuesday, and they had an emergency release out on Thursday, I think. So pretty cool. Awesome job, team.
It was fun for me to kind of see how the community responded. You can kind of see people's reactions, and I paid attention to what was going on. It was nice to see people actually validating it for themselves, and checking. So that's awesome. Yes, that is real, Anton. It's an important part of what we're trying to do. It was fun to pay attention and to see how the community was responding. There was a lot of people like, well, what if, right? There's always the what if, what's next? What else do we need to What else are we waiting for? What's next? What's the next exploit going to be?
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing about our community too is, that ability to respond. I'm so impressed. I already hold the Spring team on a pretty high pedestal. With regard to what they've done for our community and for my career as a whole. And this just, reaffirmed. It gives me all the confidence in the world that, I chose the right team to get behind. So it's great in that.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. I don't really have anything else to talk about on this. Do you?
Maybe later. We can keep going forward. But yeah, I'd like to come back and talk about like what should the normal mode be. But we can talk about that, later in the show.
Okay, cool. So I did not put out a newsletter today. I usually put one out every Monday. Kids were sick Thursday and Friday. I was basically out Thursday afternoon and all Friday, so that's always fun. We are going on vacation in 2 weeks, so I'm hoping everybody is just done with being sick because it's just not fun. So
I hope so too.
Yeah, I know. I know you're going through a lot of the same stuff. So
yeah, we did have a lot of the same stuff.
So I didn't put together a newsletter because I didn't do much last week. So I do have a demo for today, though. I am working on a presentation for upcoming Spring One tour, which is 3 weeks away. Holy wow! We're finally going to get together. That's going to be awesome. So I'm excited for that. Not only to see the entire team, but to actually be presenting live. I haven't done a live presentation in, I think the last one was, it was Code Mash in the beginning of 2020 before the pandemic started, because it was January. So that's the last live presentation I gave, and really the last place I've been to where there was a lot of people in the same place. So looking forward to it. But that presentation that I'm going to give is on Spring for GraphQL. So I have a bunch of things that I'm working on for that. I have an episode of Code coming up this week on Tanzu TV. So if you want to head over there and check that out, that'll be on Wednesday. We're just going to do more of this Spring for GraphQL. We're going to walk through a bunch of demos, and I'm building out some stuff for that presentation. So what I want to show today is, I don't want to get into the whole what is Spring for GraphQL. We'll do that another time. I just want to kind of quickly show a demo on this, though, because I ran into something and I wasn't quite sure how to fix it, and I thought maybe I should share this out. So I'm going to show just a quick example of a GraphQL app. I'm just a demo that I built, and then we'll talk about the problem and talk about a solution. So the cool thing about GraphQL, so Spring for GraphQL is going to be hopefully released, I think if we go back to our trusty calendar, it should be next month. So if we go over to May, here is Spring for GraphQL 1.0, and that really coincides with Spring Boot 2.7. So before Spring Boot 2.6, the Spring Boot starter GraphQL was really it was in an experimental status, but now that starter is out. So if we're going to use that, this will kind of, if you go to start.spring.io and want to choose GraphQL, it'll be there as a starter if you're using 2.7. So I have one of the milestones for 2.7. I have the Spring Boot starter GraphQL, and this is really just a web MVC app. So that's really all I have as far as dependencies go. I'll just walk you around the application. I've kind of already built it, and again, we'll take a look at the problem. So I have, the kind of two pillars of any GraphQL, Spring for GraphQL, GraphQL for Java application. The two kind of pillars are the schema and the query language. So we have this schema that we create. So we have this books.graphqls, and this defines our schema. We have a book, we have a rating, we have an author. You can see that is going to kind of line up to these things over here. And then inside of GraphQL, we have these different types, things like queries or mutations or subscriptions. So I have a few queries here, and one of them just says, hey, this is all the books. Return to me a collection of books. So if you look at this, I have a book, which is just a record. It contains an ID, a title, pages, a rating, and an author. A rating is just an enum, how we're going to rate this book. And then I have some repositories for those. And inside of the book repository, I'm not doing anything Spring Data-wise. I'm not connected to a database. I just have a in-memory representation of books. I have a single book in there right now, Reactive Spring by my coworker, Josh Long. Of course, I'm going to give that 5 stars. I actually don't know how many pages are in there. I just threw that in there. But. So we have some data here.
Changes.
What? I know, he does update a lot.
So the number of pages changes.
That's true. That's true. So we have this book repository, and normally we have this book controller. So this is kind of, if you're new to GraphQL, it's similar to the kind of REST world. We're just creating a controller. We annotate it with that @controller stereotype so that the GraphQL configuration behind the scenes can kind of pick this up. And just like we would with like a get mapping or a post mapping, we can use these annotations here like schema mapping or query mapping. This schema mapping is really just the long form. If this were called all books, I wouldn't need this, and I could just call this query mapping. I just wanted to kind of show 2 different examples here. But this controller method is going to return a list of books. It's going to return all the books, which is really just one, right? And so it's calling our repository, and it's calling find all, and it's going to return them all. So this is kind of a base application that's just returning a collection of books. If we were to go ahead and run this, the nice thing about GraphQL, that's the one thing I do want to show real quick. So GraphQL comes with this kind of Explorer, GraphQL. It's like a user interface to kind of run these GraphQL queries. There's also a default endpoint. So if you look in here, there is a spring.graphql.path. There's a default endpoint for all of our GraphQL queries or mutations. Everything runs off of /GraphQL. Now you can change this, but by default, that's what it looks like. So knowing that, we can go back to localhost 8080, and we get this nice little user interface where, it has some information like, hey, these are some tips on writing GraphQL queries. The nice thing about GraphQL is the way that it's created. We get this kind of automatic documentation. So if you come over here and say docs, I have a query. I have that query, that all books one, that returns a list of books. What does a book look like? It has these properties on it, right? And then, we have a rating, and an author is made up of first name, last name, etc. So it's really nice that it's kind of self-documenting. I have a query here. This is what a GraphQL kind of query looks like. We're just saying, hey, I want to return all the books. Inside those books, I'm going to return ID, title, pages. The rating is a type, and the author is a type. So if we go ahead and run this, this will call out to the controller that calls to the repository and returns this data back. So what I want to talk about today, though, is this is fine. This is working good. What if I introduce a front end? So now I have a client that is going to consume this GraphQL data, right? Again, if you're testing in like the GraphQL Explorer, if you're testing in like Postman, you're not going to run into issues. But when you create a client that's now running on a different port, we're going to come across this lovely thing called cores, right? So what I want to talk about, actually, let's just walk around this app real quick too. This is just the, what happened there? This is just a simple view app. Again, if you don't write Vue, don't worry about it. Just a simple application that has like one interface on it. And in the package.json, we're using Apollo. Apollo is something that you can use in front-end apps to work with GraphQL. We're also using Vue 3, so Apollo has this, or Vue Apollo has this Apollo composable package that you can pull down. And it just makes working with Vue 3 and Apollo nice. So the same thing, we start with this query that's all books. We want to send this query over to the Spring app, and we want to get all of those books. We're using some composables here, use query and use result, just to get that back. Once we have those books, we just iterate over those and display them on the screen. So what I want to do here is run this, and we're going to have a problem, but that's kind of the point of this. So I'm going to run this with npm run dev. We are on localhost 3000. So let's come back over here. And error, failed to fetch. So now we have an error. So if we look in our console, you'll see if you've done any kind of web development, whether it's REST, GraphQL, anything where you're trying to fetch data from a different origin, or in this case, a different port on localhost, we run across this thing called CORS Posse. This is just a browser making sure that it's just a security constraint, making sure we can't do anything there with a different resource, right? So, and then I just want to show one other thing here. So if we reload this and go to network, you'll see, that request is running over localhost 8080/GraphQL. Everything runs off that GraphQL endpoint. So normally, the way that we would fix this in a REST app, right, is we'd come into our book controller and we'd say, hey, I want to go ahead and allow this. I want to allow cross origin. Now you can get a little bit more specific in here and say like who you want to allow, what headers, what credentials, things like that. We're not gonna go that far today. But this cross origin is just for this book controller. We don't have a mapping on this book controller. This book controller isn't a request mapping / GraphQL, right? It is, but this particular controller isn't. Every single controller we create, book controller, author controller, rating controller, all of these things fall under that single / GraphQL endpoint. So the question then becomes, how can we allow CORS for our specific client application to talk to the GraphQL endpoints? So we're going to remove these, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a new Java class, and we're going to call this is just going to be a web config. This is going to be a configuration class, and we are going to implement something called the web Mvc Configure. And if we go into web Mvc Configure and look at the structure, look down here, there is a mapping, add CORS mapping. So this configures the global cross-origin request processing. The configured CORS mappings apply to annotated controllers, functional endpoints, and static resources. So this is really the best way for us to go ahead and configure this CORS for across our application, right? Instead of just on a per controller type of situation. So the way that we need to do that is we're going to implement that method. And what we are going to do is we're going to simply say, give me the registry. And I want to go ahead and add a mapping for that /GraphQL. And I want to set the allowed origins. Just for this case, we're going to say localhost 3000. So now, if we go ahead and rerun our application, and we go back to the localhost 3000, we now have that single book. And we can see down here, we get a 200. Again, we're asking localhost 8080 for GraphQL. It is a post method, so we're posting that GraphQL query that we constructed. And you can see now we have that access control allow origin. So this is the one that we're allowing. And everything comes back with the 200, and we get a response. Here's our information that came back. And then we're just using it in the front end to kind of iterate over each of those. And if we look in view, we can see we have books that came back. Here's our one book with our author, Josh Long, our rating of 5 stars, of course, and the title Reactive Spring. So yeah, that's what I wanted to show. If you're working with GraphQL and you need to kind of set up some CORS mappings, allow origins from different clients, or everything that you can do when it comes to configuring CORS, this is probably the best way to do that. We usually have some kind of configuration class where we're configuring some things on the web, so just kind of throw it in there. Cool, that's all I got.
That's good. And there's another way to do that, right? The CORS mapping configuration. Do I have to do it in code? Isn't there a property that I can configure as well? For the
Let's
allowed
see.
origin?
I don't know. So this would be CORS. So yes, so spring.graphql.CORS allow origins.
There it is.
Oh, we're just going to allow all. Let's do that. You learn something every day. I did not know that was a property.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right? This is another part, the value of pairing and seeing how each other does things. When I see things like that, a hard-coded URL, for example.
Yep.
I'm like, there's got to be a better way. And then I think, how would I pull that out? And then I think, oh wait, I'll bet you there's already a property for that.
There is. So this one worked. This allows all, but again, you may not want to allow all. So
right. But we could put our 3000 there, right?
We could do that. They're really just different strategies for different companies. So you could do, I know we've done this in the past where you have different credentials, or I think what exposed headers. I think we've looked for like certain headers in certain cases, like this header has to be there, because we weren't like necessarily interested in like locking it down to like everyone, but if there wasn't too much sensitive data in there, but we didn't exactly want it to be a public one, we just, hey, if this header exists, go ahead and allow that. So, cool. Yeah, I was I had looked at a couple of the properties that I can configure, things like the GraphQL Explorer, the GraphQL endpoint, but I had not gotten to the rest of the properties that you can use. So I learned something new today. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks for that. That was good. Super valuable to me. The thing that I appreciated is you didn't have a backend. You didn't put a data store per se, and a lot of times I think I was associating GraphQL with a certain type of backend, and that's not the case at all, right? It's a query that would be tied to
it's independent of a data store. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, we have an in-memory representation here. You can use Spring Data JDBC, Spring Data JPA. You can use JDBC template and just grab some information from a database. Again, yeah, completely agnostic to whatever the data fetching is.
One of the things that I'm trying to do is I just want to get some of these examples out. So my first question is this going to be in your GitHub? Hello GraphQL.
Yes. I will get this particular one into GitHub probably right after this ends today. So,
all right. Second, this weekend I spent a lot of time going through Stack Overflow and Twitter. Again, I started with the Spring 4 shell, just like trying to find questions that were unanswered and help. Cool. What I realized over the weekend is that a lot of people don't know how to ask good questions. It's true. And one of my goals for this audience, for the people that are coming to office hours, one of my goals is to help them understand how to ask good questions. And I feel like we should have like a rule of 4 since today's 4-4, or maybe we kind of keep going with that. But like, there's this this move where like, hey, I ran into something, I was trying something, and I'm stuck, right? And a lot of people are like, hey, like you should be able to infer what version I was using and what this, and they just ask
Right.
really open-ended
Right.
questions, and it makes it really difficult to even help.
Yeah.
And a lot of times there's more than one thing wrong, right? When they're
Yeah.
sharing their question.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've been trying to do is like, I want to make it clear on how to ask a good question, because I want people to bring their questions to office hours. So if I want people to bring their questions, I want them to bring them in the right way. I want to kind of
Yep.
set uh, a tone for what's a good question.
Yep.
And to me, if I've tried some version of something, whatever it is, right? It's not just, this isn't just Spring, but anything. I tried to do something and I expected this. I expected this outcome based on the documentation, based on a demo that I saw, based on something. I tried something, I had an expectation, but I got a different output. I got a different outcome than
Mm-hmm.
what I expected. That's a great start.
Yeah.
But the better start, the better way to present this to this community is to then share an example that can replicate it. And they'll always say, well, it's something internal. You can make a copy of it and put it on a GitHub or make
Yep.
copy that code, but give somebody the ability, without just kind of reading and trying to fill in the gaps in their head, give somebody the ability to take some code and demonstrate the issue, the
Yep.
behavior that match your expectation. Uh,
Yep.
so, hey, I tried to do something with some version. I had an expected outcome that didn't match.
Yep.
Here's the code that duplicates it. What's a fourth thing? We need to throw a fourth thing in. Yeah, I don't know. Thank you. Maybe
Um,
that's the fourth thing. Is say thank you for your time and thank you for your help on this in
that's
advance.
true.
Maybe that's the fourth thing, just to keep it with the four. Uh,
Yeah.
that's what I
And
want.
this does a couple things too. If you ever try to submit some of the repos on GitHub, they have like this template on how you have to ask a question, and it's like, hey, state your question. How did you replicate it? Like you said, what version are you using? What's your operating system? A whole bunch of details, and these details are not there to like slow you down. They're there to do two things. One, help the people who want to help you kind of dial in on what your problem is. And two, it really is to make you think about it too. Too often people come across a problem and they're like, oh, okay, let's go to Stack Overflow and post this. Like, you can't do that. You need to step back and like start to think about your problem before you go asking for help. And I think going through this progression of, okay, what version am I on? What is my operating system? What is the specific issue that I'm coming across? Can I reproduce it outside of this huge project that I'm working on at work? Can I maybe take this into just a sample Spring project and replicate it outside of all the other noise that's going on? And if I can't, then maybe something over there is causing it. And now it starts to get you to think more about the problem instead of just what is the solution. So I like that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I found a lot of clearly students asking their homework questions.
Yep.
Even though I wanted to help them, it was difficult. But what I think that I decided was that I'm going to devote a little bit of time every week to just answer and demonstrate things that are questions that I found on Stack Overflow or Gitter or
Mm-hmm.
our Twitter Spring Developers community or the Java developer community. And I'm just going to start putting those things into my GitHub repo, and for the the polished and great ones, I will put those into the Tanzu Developer Center as well.
Cool. Another great resource, I don't know if you know about this, but I run a Facebook community called Spring Boot Developers. And look at this. This is just amazing every time I look. 59,000 people are in this group.
That is amazing.
There's definitely a lot of good questions in here, but I think that we could definitely benefit from your type of structure there. So as we start to work through this, I'm going to add that to here too, because I just get questions all over. A lot of the work on this Facebook group is moderation. I have to go in there and delete spam, which is about a fourth of the posts. But I think being able to say, hey, this is what a question is going to look like. I think that would help out a lot of people. So, but if you're not a member, Spring Boot devs are developers on Facebook.
There you go. That is excellent. Yeah. So we've had this conversation many times about what does it look like? How can we get deeper dive questions into the group? And I know that there's a lot of places to go and ask these questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I landed on as far as being the way to ask questions, if they can ask questions in a good format, hey, I expected this, then tag it with spring office hours. Then that could be something that we can look for, because we can do that on Stack Overflow and Twitter and all that kind of stuff, and Facebook. That might be our way of saying, hey, maybe this is a good office hours question. We can get our community to help us with good office hours questions. But also the idea, one thing I didn't do this last weekend was keep track of the questions that I was answering or the comments that I was making. It might be a nice little thing for us to do is say, hey, here's a couple of the questions that came up or that were answered from some of these other sources, and just point to them and make those available. We could probably do that on the Facebook page and on the Twitter community as well. But just having...
I was going to throw this idea out there too. I know we talked about that, but the problem with throwing a question on, say, the Facebook group is that's just one place. It's not a place where multiple people would go. So maybe something else we could do is we can have a GitHub repo where there's just like a markdown file. Here's the question. Here's the answer we came up with. Or here's a video portion. You could timestamp something on YouTube. So, from 3 minutes to 8 minutes, this is where we answered that question. Or maybe give a short blurb about it. The other thing that you can do on GitHub is turn on something like discussions. So you could come in here and maybe we have just a general question area. So you can say, hey, this is a new discussion. You select a category. It's a Q&A. We'll answer it. Here's the title. Here's the description of the problem. And again, we could pin something in here that kind of tells you how to ask the question correctly. So just a thought, just a way that we could probably get some... I like your idea. We need somewhere where we can go, here are the questions we've answered in the past, because as new people come in and start asking questions, we're going to get a lot of duplicates. And it's hey, here's the general way of you can do that. Here's the answer to that. But if you want a much longer detailed explanation, we've done that one already. Go over here and check that out.
Absolutely. We'll get there. But I like that idea. We should maybe keep a list of the questions that we've answered during office hours, not to take away from re-answering them, but just as a resource, as another resource. I think that there would be value there in the long run as well.
Yeah, and just thinking out loud, I mean, you and I are all about kind of repurposing content. If I answer a question and I have a good answer for a question, I want to use that again. And so maybe I'm putting together a video on a particular question that we answered. Now I have something that I can use, or I want to write a blog post on that thing. I don't have to start from scratch. I have the content that we've already created for that. So as long as if I can get away from starting from scratch on any content, I'm going to take that opportunities.
Excellent. Well, this is good. I see one question here.
Yeah.
Hey, where do I get started? Yeah, is that yeah? Help me. Can you help me with some resources where I can learn to connect with database? And under that it says also able to connect with the front end. And again, we've covered this. Dan, you've got many videos. I think that kind of cover this already.
Yeah, I would say again, I'm always going to push people to kind of the docs. There are two places to kind of start. One, when you just need to like do a specific thing. Deshaun and I have talked about this, I think, just last week. When you want to accomplish a specific things, maybe digging through the reference guide isn't the place to start. But like, I want to follow along and do that thing that I'm trying to learn. A really good place for that is the guides. So if you come in here and you want to say database, data, it's got to be something. So accessing a relational database using JDBC with Spring. So this is a good example that will probably allow you to, so you're just using JDBC template, so in Java, we have JDBC. That's how we can kind of connect to a database. Java database connection, and like that's the underlying. You're never going to use raw JDBC. There's always abstractions on top of it to make that a lot easier. One of those abstractions is Spring's JDBC template. So this guide kind of walks you through that. This would be a good place to start, and then I kind of lean towards the documentation. So if you go into Spring Boot and we want to learn, if we go into the reference docs, there's probably something on data. So there it is, data, SQL databases. Hey, how do I configure a data source? How do I use an embedded one? So an embedded one, there's databases like H2 where you don't have to have like a MySQL instance running or a SQL Server running. You can just kind of use this embedded in-memory database, something like H2, HSQL, or Derby. These are good options and just kind of getting started quickly without having to configure a whole bunch of things. And then just go through the documentation here. Looks like we can connect to a production database. How do we configure a data source? How do we use that JDBC template to talk to the database? Next step is the more abstractions is things like JPA and Spring Data JPA. So I think that's where I would start. How about you, Deshaun?
Yep, absolutely. I think that's going to be our default answer. If we can get our community. And here's the other thing, right? Office hours shouldn't be a one-way street. I'm going to try to say the name. Saravanasubia. If this interaction, if you've tried the docs and you've got feedback, I want this to be a two-way street. The office hours concept, I want it to be a two-way street. We would love to get feedback on, hey, this doc really helped us, or this doc really didn't. I was looking more for this. I expected this. We want to make this an opportunity to kind of share those feedbacks as well, good and bad. That's how we're going to make a better community. So if the resources that we're pointing you to aren't what you expected, let us know. But I'm a big fan of the documentation. Spring.io is a great place to start. And it covers a lot of the bases to get you really far, really fast. So give it a try. Thank you.
Cool. And if you get stuck, we could always go through a demo on this. I could go through the guide next week if you want to. Let us know.
Yeah. So we've got, I think, we're kind of, we've been doing this show as kind of a pilot, if you will, where like, hey, we're trying things out. We've got some big stuff coming up. But I think it's okay to announce that we are planning on taking this to the real deal. We're going to make a show out of it, where we've been doing it on our personal streams. The question has been asked and answered, that we can take it to VMware Tanzu's streams. So I think I shared that we're kind of busy this month, and then we'll kind of keep doing it, this path for now. But I think May-ish, this will be on a new channel. This will be over on VMware Tanzu TV. And we appreciate
that's
all the support
exciting.
we've had. the great questions that we've had. It seems to be a valuable channel both ways again. So we're going to keep going. And with that, I think we'll maybe, be able to do it a few more times a week once we get it onto onto the big show. So thank you.
Yeah, I think what this does too is it allows us. So if you are not familiar with the Tanzu Developer Center, again, I keep pushing people to this, not because I've been asked to. Deshaun, this. Our boss does not ask us to push people to anything. We're here to just kind of code and talk to the community. But I didn't really know about the Tanzu Developer Center before I started here. And there's just a lot of really great information on here for free. But under this Tanzu TV, there's all these shows, right? One of those shows is this code thing where we go through and just kind of write some code and do a live stream. But once we get our office hours show on here, we can now have episode pages. And those episode pages can now, this is a terrible picture of me, by the way. There'll be a page with information about that show. Here are the things that we kind of covered. Here are maybe some of the questions we got. And hey, guess what? Here's a link to those resources that we were talking about where we answered those questions. So I like just having a place where we can kind of direct people to. So again, once we kind of move over to Tanzu TV, take a look over here on the Developer Center, and we will have some nice, pretty graphics like this somewhere on here. So I'm excited.
With that, the one thing that I can say and will say is that the work that I'm doing here, repositories and examples, I want them to land here on the Tanzu Developer Center. I want Tanzu Developer Center to be the primary source that people go to get their questions answered, to look for the good patterns, to look for the things that are above and beyond just a regular 101 or 201 that you might find in the docs. I want their go-to resource for anything Tanzu Spring related to be the Tanzu Developer Center. So definitely this community should be looking for more things coming out of this team for sure in the near future, landing on Tanzu Developer Center.
And if this doesn't tell you that we take this website very seriously, I don't know what does. It has a light mode and a dark mode.
I mean, that's it. Like that says enterprise all the way.
It's the real deal.
We did it. I thanks to all the people that put in all of the time to deliver that massive.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that do a lot of great work on that site. So
we're lucky to be a part of this little thing here.
And I love that everything we do on there is Markdown. I just get to write some Markdown and push to Git and GitHub, and it gets pulled in. So I like that workflow.
So there's no more questions. So I'm going to ask you a question. Have you taken the latest TCE for a spin yet? Tanzu community?
No, I have not. I have, again, I was out last week. I'm now frantically trying to get this presentation ready for 2 weeks from now. So again, because I'm out for a week, and then when I come back on Saturday, I have Sunday to regroup, and then I fly out on Monday to Chicago. So I don't want to be working on a presentation on the beach. I want to get it done before that.
I'm planning on doing my Spring One Tour demo and the Chicago Java user group demo. I'm planning on doing those on TCE, or at least part of it on TCE. Cool. So yeah, I am digging in.
Nice. Yeah. What are you?
Spending a lot of time on my upcoming presentations.
Yeah, it's. I've given. I'm obviously nowhere near Josh Long's status, but I've given enough in-person presentations to where I'm comfortable doing it. But I've gotten so used to being back at home, and I've started thinking about, well, how much do I want to actually code on stage? Because at home, this is my setup that I live stream with, that I do YouTube videos with. So when I was asked to speak at Spring One last year, in the comfort of my own home, I was this is easy. I can code all day on this thing. It's way different coding on a podium on stage when you don't, I don't have a mouse or a keyboard. Like, so I code less when I'm in person because it's not the same environment. So those are the kind of things that I'm kind of running across. Again, haven't spoken in person in 2 years, so I'm a little bit nervous. I mean, I guess
just this.
if you're not, what are you doing here?
Just this. So
Yeah.
I'm realizing, and this is one of the things that I did too. My laptop, I'm not so great with the little touchpad and stuff. So I have my keyboard and mouse that I will be bringing with me, and that will show up here later today. I've only been in this room for a couple of days, but yeah, that's one of those changes that I just let it work. And I think Mario Gray also does that. He kind of brings his regular clickety-clack keyboard to do his live coding demos as well.
That's a good idea, though. I didn't think about, just as you're talking, I was like, well, maybe I should like practice this on just my laptop and not in the comfort of my own. I should go practice this upstairs, like on a table or something, with just the laptop. So I may do that.
Every rep counts.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Hey, so wait, I know I'm coming in Monday at like 4, so I will make it to the Java user group. What are you and Josh talking on? I don't even know.
This is going to be all about Spring Native, all about how we can get our Spring apps compiled with the Graphql VM so that they start up faster, and they got a little smaller footprint. It just all those things. What does that mean? And
cool.
For me, I think it's different than for a lot of folks. But I've got this concept, this theory that the data center as we know it today is going to be changing a lot over the next couple of years. When I say data center, even today, when I say data center, what popped into my head is a box about this big that's got a bunch of different devices in it that's setting up on like an antenna or a telephone pole or a tree or a fence. That there's going to be a lot of this new edge development that's going to be happening, and these data center in a box is going to be more of a reality, and I think more of the default in the near future, where we're going to have a lot more, millions more data centers in a box around the globe than we do today, and we're going to have a lot more compute out in those little boxes than we do in these big buildings around the globe today.
Cool. Well, it should be a fun Java user group because you have a lot of the team there, and Chicago is always a big draw for Java user group, so it should be fun.
It should be fun. I'm excited about it.
I'm just trying to figure out when I'm going to eat dinner. It's either early dinner or a very late dinner.
You bring your dinner to the meetup. There's this thing called DoorDash. Just have them deliver it straight to the conference hall.
There you go. I'll get some tacos and maybe a margarita and sit back and watch.
That's a great idea. So anybody that wants to show up, Chicago user group, the date, I don't know off the top of my head.
It is the 18th because we fly out the 18th. So, yep. Oh, no, sorry. The 24th, right? 25th?
I got the technology to do that. We might as well look while we're here.
I think it's the 25th. I'm going to go 25th.
I think it's the 25th. Chicago user group in Chicago. I think that you are right. Yes. The Chicago Java user group meetup. Looks like it's at 7:00.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Well, cool. This is great. Thanks again for another show. Thanks to everybody for the questions. Thanks for being a part of this. Stay tuned. We're gonna keep trucking. Stay tuned.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Deshaun mentioned a bunch of different avenues. If you have questions or a coworker who has questions, we have the Spring Developers community on Twitter. There's one on Facebook I showed you. There's a Gitter. There's just Twitter in general if you just want to reach out to Deshaun or myself. There's a bunch of different avenues right now. We'll try and find a central place for that in the future. But for now, just reach out to us, and then we'll use those questions in the next episode we do, which as of right now will be next Monday. But we'll see. As Deshaun mentioned, once we move over to Tanzu TV, we could do this 2 days a week or 5 days a week. Who knows? We'll see.
Excellent.
Cool. Good catching up with you, Deshaun. It was a great time this morning, and I look forward to our next one.
All right.
See you, Spring fans.